All right, it's Wednesday night, back at 8:30 p.m. No delays tonight, no distractions, no having to cancel the show or postpone the show and then ending up turning around and doing it again. We got a little mixed up last Wednesday night, but fortunately we're back here, ready to go as regularly scheduled for the Panther-Lair Show, 8:30 p.m. here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You see the website below, Panther-Lair.com is the website address. Don't click that. That's not a link. That's a graphic. You just want to type those words, those letters into your address bar above so you can go check out the best Pitt sports coverage you're going to find on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Of course, right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, we have our video content, whether it is post-practice interviews or practice highlights or the daily morning Pitt video that we do every day, Monday through Friday here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We do these live streams. We do all kinds of stuff, and you don't want to miss any of it. So subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And while you're here, make sure you like this video. And yeah, we appreciate that. We like to see those numbers go up. Kind of flushed, sort of rushed into this thing. Had to come straight to the Panther-Lair Show this week from our Little League Baseball draft for the 10 and under team. Had to split up the teams tonight and with a bunch of other middle-aged Mount Lebanon dads figure out who goes on what team. But I won't. That's where my brain is right now. I was going to talk about Pro Day. I was going to talk about recruiting and spring camp. And I want to talk about how we got this kid and didn't get that kid. And I wonder if we can engineer any trades because we need some fortifications when it comes to pitching and things like that. But anyway, get back on topic here. Get back focused. I appreciate everybody who's already in the live stream. You can post your comments and questions in that section over there. Where is it? Right over there it is on the right-hand side of your screen. You can put your comments and questions about anything going on in Pitt sports, whether it's football, basketball, recruiting, something we're talking about, something that's been going on this week. And quite frankly, I mean, this has been a pretty busy week, a crazy busy week, as a matter of fact. You know, the commitments rolling in. They're up to, 6 commitments in the month of March, 10 commitments total for the class of 2024. Spring camp keeps rolling, and I think some of our reports yesterday, following the scrimmage they had on Saturday, I think there was some pretty interesting information that sort of trickled out there. It was Pro Day yesterday. It was Pro Day today. Today's Wednesday still. I get mixed up on my days, but it was Pro Day today, so there was a lot going on in the south side. You see the pictures. We're kind of cycling through there on the slideshow for tonight. So there was a lot happening there to talk about, and that's sort of fresh in my mind, largely because Izzy Abanikanda was outstanding. You know, the 40 time and the vertical jump were better than I even expected. I knew he had speed. I knew he was athletic. I knew he could test well in those things, but I didn't know if he would put up numbers like that. So we could talk about that for sure. We could talk about spring camp. We can talk about this recruiting run they've been on it. And I talked about recruiting, I think, on the morning Pitt yesterday morning, but maybe we'll start there with all the commitments that they picked up in the last few weeks and all the commitments that they have for the class of 2024 already. I think it's natural to sort of ask the question, why? Why is this happening? Why are they on such a roll with recruiting? Why have they been having the success they've been having? And I asked that question myself, and I forget, after they got their 5th or 6th commitment of this month, I sent a text to somebody, who's sort of close to the situation, and I just said, "What is going on? You know what I mean? Like, what is happening here? Where are all these commitments coming from, and why are they all happening right now?" And I think there, to some extent, there's been a bit of a perception shift for recruits that Pitt is not for everybody. This isn't the case with everyone, but for a lot of recruits, I think they're looking at Pitt, they're visiting Pitt, they're looking at the success they've had over the last 2 seasons, they're being around the program and the coaches and the players, and they're saying, you know what, whereas in the past, maybe guys would say, this is good, I really like it here, I'm going to come back in June and see what I think after a couple official visits. Now, it seems that a bunch of guys are saying, I don't want to wait. I don't want to hold off. The offensive lineman they just got said he wanted to commit in like January or February, but he held off. And holding off means he waited until March as opposed to waiting until June. I think there are guys that they've gotten in June in the past who have come in for spring visits, liked what they saw, really enjoyed it, thought Pitt was one of their top schools, still wanted to go see other schools, still wanted to take those official visits, still wanted to wait a little bit to make their decisions. Maybe there's not so much of a wait and see approach anymore with Pitt. Not necessarily that Pitt is squeezing these guys or saying you're going to lose your spot or we're going to run out of scholarships or anything like that, but just that they're seeing what they see and saying, I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of the success that they've been having. And they have been having a lot of success. I mean, you look at 20 wins over the course of 2 seasons. You look at an ACC championship 2 years ago, and you look at this past year where they win 9 games. They finish on a 5-game winning streak. They beat UCLA in the Sun Bowl. So, I mean, they get a good win. I mean, this wasn't Eastern Michigan in the Detroit Bowl. They get a good win over a quality opponent, a brand name, big name opponent in a big name bowl. And yeah, you do end up with a little bit of momentum. They've got a guy who's one of the top running backs in the country. They've got Kalijah Cansey getting all this attention. They've got Kenny Pickett 2 years ago as a Heisman Trophy finalist and then a first-round draft pick, the first quarterback who gets selected. They've got, even Jordan Addison, as a Biletnikoff Award winner 2 years ago, even though he was at USC this past season, I think is still an attraction for Pitt, a draw for Pitt. I think this program right now has a lot of appeal for recruits. I think recruits are looking at it and saying, I want to be a part of that, and I don't want to wait. And so they end up with 10 commitments before the end of March. And I mean, we're saying this now; it's still on the 29th. Who knows? They could get more. It's pretty remarkable to see because we haven't seen this kind of run before. Now, if last year's class was any indication, and it probably should be, they're likely not going to hold on to all of these guys. I think that probably goes without saying. I think we all understand that it's highly unlikely that you're going to keep 10 guys who are committed by the end of March in the class all the way through until December. I would have said this 10 years ago that early commitments, you're running the risk of losing some of them. And I would say it even more now because it just seems to be the way of things. Guys do commit and decommit probably a little more frequently than they did in the past. And so you look at the group of 10 that they've got committed right now and you say, well, if they signed 7 or 8 of those, that's pretty good. I think you almost assume a certain amount of attrition. And I kind of feel like the Pitt coaches probably almost assume a certain amount of attrition. And not that they would look at any one specific recruit and say, you're probably not going to sign with us. I think we all understand that. They wouldn't look at a recruit and say that, but I think they would look at the group as a whole and say, there's 10 guys here. If we clear 8 of them, if we get 8 of them signed in December, that'll be pretty good. Now, there's certainly, you could look through and prioritize 8 out of those 10 or 10 out of those 10 or 5 out of those 10 and say, this is the guy I definitely want. These are the guys that they definitely want to hold on to. But I think, and probably the coaches would say that too, they probably have some priorities among this class of 10. But on the whole, I think it does speak well to the momentum the program has, to the success that the program's been enjoying, and kind of where they stand coming off of 2 successful seasons. And I would think, that if they're able to have another successful season this year, win 9 or 10 games again, get 30 wins over 3 seasons, be competitive in the ACC, put yourself in a good bowl game, beat another Power 5 opponent in a bowl game, if you can have that kind of success again, for whatever we want to say about the 2022 season, it still ended up as a 9-win season with a good bowl win. If you can have that kind of year again, I think the momentum's only going to grow. I think that the success on the recruiting trail is only going to grow. And as you stack class after class like that, bringing in that kind of talent and having success recruiting and get those higher level guys, that's going to obviously help your on-field product. They've got something going right now. I think they've got something really good going right now. And, it's sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes what happens in recruiting can be a bit of a barometer for the momentum your program has and the success your program's having and the perception of your program. Recruiting is perception, if nothing else, right? Recruiting is perception. And if you're having success like Pitt is having right now, I think that speaks well of the perception of Pitt football, which is pretty encouraging, I would say. Pretty encouraging stuff. As we look through, and we can go more into the recruiting class. If you have questions about specific guys, we can talk about different guys. But, just looking over the class right now, 10 recruits, currently ranked number 8. The number 8 recruiting class in the country for 2024 is your Pitt Panthers. Now, they have 10 commitments. By my count, looking at the rivals.com list, there are only 2 other schools in the country with double-digit commitments right now. Georgia has 11. LSU has 11. Georgia's 11 features 1 5-star recruit and 9 4-stars. LSU's 11 features 8 4-stars. Notre Dame is 3rd in the country with 9 commitments. In the recruiting rankings, Georgia's number 1, LSU's number 2, Notre Dame is number 3. They have 7 4-star prospects. So does Michigan. Florida State's got 5. Clemson has 5. Who else? Ohio State's got 4. Florida's got 3, and then Pitt does have 2 4-star commitments, but they're helped by the quantity of having 10 total commitments, and it's put them up to number 8 in the country. But as you look, so I mean that's pretty cool. You don't often see Pitt in the top 10 of recruiting rankings. You don't often see Pitt in the top 10 of recruiting rankings at any point in the cycle. And so for Pitt to be there right now is a positive. When you look at this class, out of these 10 recruits, there's 2 offensive linemen, there's 4 defensive linemen, there's a running back, a receiver, a tight end, and a defensive back. 2 4-star prospects, Day-Day Farmer, the wide receiver from Florida, and Jasir Whittington, the defensive tackle from Philadelphia. Whittington's been committed since last April. He's Pitt's longest standing commitment in the class of 2024. He was the first recruit to commit in that class back in April. He is still committed, coming up on a year here, just a couple weeks away from 1 year. Farmer committed on Christmas Day. And, with all these guys, it's going to be a battle. You're going to work to hold on to them. I think Tayshawn Banks, the defensive back who committed just a few days ago from Cincinnati, Ohio, I think he's going to be one they're going to have to fight to hold on to. He had 9 interceptions in 14 games last season. I think he had 7 in the regular season, 2 in the playoffs. He returned 2 for touchdowns. He had a kick return touchdown, a punt return touchdown. The guy's a playmaker all over the field. And you watch his film, and whatever questions there might be about speed or athletic ability or anything like that, I don't know what questions exist out there. Whatever questions there are, you can definitely ignore them when you watch the way he makes plays in the secondary. I think he's going to play safety at Pitt, and I think he looks like he's going to be really, really good. The two defensive tackles they have committed, Jasir Whittington, who I mentioned, and Francis Brew, who committed, is one of these March commitments. They're both smaller playmaking defensive tackles. Whittington we list at 6'2", 255. I'm not sure if he's still around that weight or not. Brew we list at 6'2", 270. So I mean, neither one of those guys is massive. You know what I mean? It's not 6'4", 310, or 6'4", 315 or something like that. You're looking at smaller defensive tackles, but Pitt certainly has a history of success with those kind of guys, don't they? They have those guys. They know how to work with those guys. Charlie Partridge knows how to coach those guys. And Kalijah Cansey being the most recent example as a unanimous All-American and likely first-round draft pick after his performance in the Combine and the Pro Day this offseason. So you can understand why a younger defensive tackle, like a Whittington or a Brew, would want to play in this defense. And it's, as we talk about recruiting success and momentum, I mean, I think you can get into different positions. And to me, it's no surprise that they've got 4 defensive linemen already committed. I might have said 5 earlier, but it's 4 defensive linemen already committed. In Jasir Whittington and Francis Brew, the defensive tackles, Ty Uhas and Zach Crothers, the defensive ends. I mean, I don't know. I think when you look at the success that Pitt has had with defensive linemen, and you look at Charlie Partridge and what he has done sort of individually, I mean, you got to think that's a pretty attractive sell for a recruit, don't you? To come and play in this defense and play for Charlie Partridge, I mean, you could do a lot worse. And to some extent, I would say the same thing about the defensive backs. I mean, when you look at the success that Pitt's defensive backs have had, not just in college, but in the NFL, how they continue to send guys to the pros, guys like Dane Jackson, DeMar Hamlin, and I mean, even you could go back to Avonte Maddox, Damari Mathis. I think Jason Pinnock was playing in the NFL. I mean, Jordan Whitehead still, is really good safety in the NFL. I mean, it's almost to the point where almost every guy who has started, it feels like every guy who has started in the secondary for Pitt since Pat Narduzzi got here seems to be playing in the NFL. And it's probably not 100% like that, but it feels that way. And you look, they're going to have Brandon Hill and Eric Hallett. I would think at least one, if not both, get drafted, and they're both going to get an opportunity to play in the NFL. And then you go forward to next year, you see what a guy like AJ Woods, who's pretty well put together, a pretty physical corner with a lot of speed, plus speed. MJ Devonshire, another speed demon at corner. Marquez Williams is going to have his height to overcome, but I mean, he's a fighter, and he's shown it in this defense for a long time. I mean, they're just going to keep sending defensive backs to the NFL, and I feel the same way to a certain extent about defensive linemen. There's two things I would say about the D line and the D backs in Pitt's program. One, the coaches have more or less earned the benefit of the doubt and almost blind faith when it comes to evaluations. If you see a recruit who gets offered by Pitt, if it's a defensive line prospect or a defensive back prospect, I think we're at a point now where you pretty much just have to say, okay, stars, no stars, all the stars, none of the stars, all the offers, none of the offers, whatever it is. You pretty much just kind of got to say, okay, they're probably going to be pretty good. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt because they have more than earned it. And then the other thing is that, this defense very much features those positions. It features all the positions. I mean, it's that kind of defense. But players at those positions are able to make plays, and have made plays and have given, created quite a high profile for themselves by playing in this scheme. I do think, I was thinking about Eric Hallett and Brandon Hill earlier in the wake of Pro Day. And I was thinking about how it's got to be, if you're an NFL scout and you're looking at a safety prospect or a corner prospect, and you see that they played in Pitt's defense, you see that they played in Pat Narduzzi's defense, and you're saying, you're evaluating a guy, and you're watching the film, and you're seeing this, and you're seeing that, and you're looking at his testing numbers, and you're talking to him, and all this different stuff, knowing that he sort of made it through the grind of playing in this defense, which is very unforgiving for defensive backs. It's very unforgiving for corners. You either have to play it at a high level or you're going to get beat sometimes. You can be a really, really good defensive back and a really, really good corner and still get beat in this defense just by the structure of it. It's not for the faint of heart, I guess is one way that I would say it. And safeties too. I mean, the safeties have so much to do. If you're the boundary safety, man, you better be ready to hit like a linebacker. And if you're the field safety, if you're the free safety, you are the guy out there. You are the guy. And you are pretty much responsible for the entire field. That, again, is not for the faint of heart. It's not for the weak to play defensive back in this defense. But by the time you get done, after you've played in it for 4 or 5 years, and you've started in it for 2 or 3 years, or however long you've started, you're pretty battle tested. And I have to think that looks good on the resume for a defensive back. If they've been able to play in this defense, they've been able to excel in this defense, if they've had success in this defense, if they if they didn't just quit football playing in this defense, I think that has to be a selling point for some of these guys when it comes to their NFL draft profile and their NFL, prospects. I really do, because it's just that kind of defense. It's tough. It's not an easy one to play in. Like I say, it's not for the faint of heart, but guys like Eric Hallett and Brandon Hill, they've survived it and thrived in it and become really, really good players. And I think they're going to have a chance to do it at the next level. I think Brandon Hill has a sneaky chance to be one of Pitt's best prospects to come out in this draft class. I really do. I mean, I think he's big enough We know he's physical enough. If you play that or that strong safety position, that boundary safety position in this defense, where you're coming down in the box, you're closer to the line of scrimmage, you're sticking your nose in and making a lot of tackles, that's a physical position. You can't play that if you're soft. You really can't. You have to be a hard hitter. You have to be willing to mix it up. You have to be willing to hit guys. So he's got that. So I think he's not the biggest safety, but he's not too small. He's very physical. So any questions you have about physicality due to his size, I think he more than makes up for it. He's crazy fast. I mean, we saw that at the combine with the times he ran, and he's been productive. He's played really well, again, in a defense that puts a lot of pressure on the safeties. It really does. So I think he's prepared. I think he's ready to have success at the next level. I'll be interested to see where he's drafted. I wouldn't be surprised if he climbs as high as like the 4th round, or could he go in the 3rd round? Did he test well enough to go in the 3rd round? I'm no draft expert. This is an important thing. I am not a member of draft Twitter. I just watch guys play and try and guess at what's going to happen, and then watch the draft and find out for sure. But so I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm a draft analyst. But I think Brandon Hill, his profile is really, really interesting for what he might be able to do at the next level and how he might get evaluated and potentially drafted. Izzy Abanikanda, another one, as we talk about the draft. I mean, just a huge pro day yesterday. I keep saying yesterday. A huge pro day today. I don't know where he's going to go. There's varying opinions on what he will be at the next level, or how he's being evaluated for the draft. Some people claim he's not even in the top 10 of running backs, which I find hard to believe. A guy with his size, a guy at 217 can run a 4.3 40 or maybe sub 4.3, who can jump 41 inches in the vertical, who is productive, who led the country in rushing touchdowns and doesn't have that much wear on the tires. I mean, he's less than 400 career carries in college. Some of the top guys we're talking about, Bijan Robinson, Zach Charbonnet, and Tank Bigsby, like these guys all have 500 plus carries in their college careers. It's not a ton, but it's more than 100 more than what Abanikanda has, or Devon A-Chain, or Jahmyr Gibbs. Those guys are all under 400. So I mean, I think there's a lot to like about Abanikanda, and you say, well, he doesn't have the shiftiness, maybe he doesn't have the moves. Oh, okay, we'll block for him then. Zone, get a zone blocking scheme or something. Create a lane, and he can make one move and go. Because when he does that, he's kind of gone. And at his size, at 217 pounds, running as fast as he does, I mean, that's a tough back. That's a good player in the making. So I'm going to be interested to see. I asked on Twitter, is he now a top 3 running back prospect? And the general consensus was no. Robinson and Gibbs, I think, are probably the top 2, and then a guy like Charbonnet or A-Chain or whoever. But I mean, I think Abanikanda has to have put himself into the top 5, I would think, personally. But again, I'm not really a member of Draft Twitter, so I can't, I'm not in a position to offer too much analysis on that front. But I'd like to, I like to watch it, like to talk about it, like to follow it. It's fun to follow. And it's especially fun when you have this many guys. I mean, I think you could potentially have as many as like a half dozen guys get drafted this year. And that's with saying that somebody like Shavassie Dennis or Jared Wayne is on the fence. Dennis, he tested so well today. I think the question, he seemed to suggest during an interview that there were questions about his athleticism. I don't think there were ever questions about that. I think there were questions about his size, about how big he could get, how much weight he could carry, and how much weight he could keep on. I think there were questions about that, but I don't think there were ever questions about his athleticism, which he jumped, 41 and a half inches or something like that. I don't think there were questions about his athleticism or his speed. I think there were questions about his knowledge, his football IQ. I mean, he's a really smart player. He's a really productive player. It's just a question of how big he can get and how big he can stay to play in the NFL. But I could count, I think like 5 or 6 guys, not including Wayne and Dennis, and say, yeah, they're all probably going to get drafted. I mean, Kalijah Cansey's going to get drafted. Abanikanda is going to get drafted. I think Brandon Hill will get drafted. I think Carter Warren seems to be like a guy who's going to get drafted. I think Eric Hallett has a great chance to get drafted, and then you would think Haba Baldonado will get drafted. And that doesn't, and then you could still get out to Wayne, Dennis, like maybe a guy like Marcus Minor or somebody. These guys are all going to have an outside shot, and even if they don't get drafted, they'll get signed as undrafted free agents, and they'll get a chance to show what they can do in the NFL. It's a pretty impressive draft class, and I don't know if I would have thought that a year ago. When it was Kenny Pickett and we were trying to figure out who, looking ahead at draft classes. I don't know if I would have really guessed that this would be this strong of a draft class, but I definitely, a year ago, I definitely wouldn't have guessed that Kalijah Cansey would be a first-round draft pick, and he has played himself into that. My concerns there were size. I just didn't know if he would be big enough to do it. The NFL doesn't seem to be, the NFL coaches and GMs don't seem to be as concerned about size as I was, but I guess the fact that he's 280 pounds and he's running as fast as he runs and showing the explosiveness and the strength and the playmaking, I mean, the production's obviously there. That I guess you can get over a guy being a little bit short when he does as many things as well as Kalijah Cansey does. So I didn't predict that one, but this is looking like a really good draft class for Pitt. I want to get to the comments and questions here. Real quick, I do want to tell you the Wednesday Night Live show is sponsored by Chris Gates Fitness. Chris, of course, you've heard me talk about Chris before. He's an online fitness coach from Pittsburgh, and he works with people all over the world to create customized fitness and nutrition programs that work. He's also a huge Pitt fan, and he loves supporting the Wednesday Live show every week, which is what we love about Chris. Now, once you're done listening to this show, the Panther-Lair Show, make sure you give Chris Gates' podcast a listen. Chris publishes a brand new episode every week where he takes listener questions on fitness and nutrition, and he dives deep on topics to help you put together the right routine to see progress. Chris's next episode is a listener Q&A that's going to dive into some of the biggest fitness mistakes you should avoid, plus tips for eating more protein and the best equipment in the gym to build muscle and lots of stuff. So go on any podcast platform, search Chris Gates Fitness, or you can go to his website, chrisgatesfitness.com. You can /podcast, and you can find links to his podcast and links to subscribe to it. So again, go to chrisgatesfitness.com, Chris Gates, C-H-R-I-S, Gates, G-A-T-E-S, chrisgatesfitness.com /podcast, and check out the Chris Gates Fitness podcast. I highly recommend everything Chris is doing over there at Chris Gates Fitness. He does a great job, and he will help you. He will help you get in shape and lead a healthy lifestyle. All right, comments and questions here. Let's roll over. RJCman38 is a super chatter. You can be a super chatter. Make sure your comment or your question gets read. Your comment gets read or your question gets answered. Right down there below, there's a little $sign. You can click that, kick a couple bucks to the podcast, and support us. And we will definitely make sure we answer your question. RJCman38 is a super chatter. He says, Pat Narduzzi has created buzz with how many guys he gets into the NFL. Rivals and other recruiting sites have not been kind until now. Bottom line, Narduzzi makes recruiting sites look biased and brand focused. Let's just be honest, winning 20 games in 2 years is what creates buzz despite the white noise. Okay. As far as recruiting sites and stuff, a lot of times, like people will point out the 2-star who ends up becoming an all-pro, or Cooper Kupp, or this or that. And this is what I always say, that we miss on guys. The rivals, we miss on guys with evaluation. Sometimes there's guys who develop different than we expected. We're projecting development. We're projecting the next 4 or 5 years of these guys' lives and how they're going to grow and adapt and adjust and develop in college. And sometimes we get it wrong. We miss on guys. There's no question about it. The list is long. The list of 2-stars who became all pros is long. The list of 5-stars who busted is long. We have lots that we get wrong. We have lots that we get right too. There's a lot of 5-stars who get first-round draft picks. There's a lot of 2-stars who never do anything in college. We get a lot right. Probably more than we get wrong, but that's a conversation for another day. What my contention always is, When people bring up the 2-star who becomes an All-Pro, or the 2-star is an All-American, or Dion Lewis, right? Dion Lewis. Rutgers didn't even offer Dion Lewis. Okay? Sometimes when you look at some of these guys who had no stars coming out of high school, they also had no offers coming out of high school. And so we want to make it about the recruiting sites and say, oh, rivals, they screwed that up. Well, guess what? There are people at colleges who get paid a lot more money than our analysts do and have their entire careers riding on getting it right, and they still screw it up. Look at the NFL draft, okay? Look at the NFL draft where there are busts every year. And those guys are getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. And not only that, they've got 4 or 5 or 3 years of college tape to evaluate. Okay? They're not taking a 17-year-old kid and trying to project what they're going to be over the next 5 years, which is what we're doing at Rivals.com. We're putting stars based on the projections of what they might be or what we think they'll develop into as a college player, right? We're trying to rate them as prospects. We're trying to rate how they project and how they'll develop. The NFL, they've got 3, 4, 5 years of college tape. These kids going through college strength and conditioning programs, playing in college games, in college systems. They have a wealth of information that we are not privy to when we're rating them coming out of high school. And they still get it wrong. Or it's not always easy to project how a guy is going to develop. Well, one of my biggest contentions always, when it comes to the rankings and rating systems and why this guy busted and why this guy succeeded, one thing you can never account for. You can never account for, no matter how hard you try, and college coaches deal with this as well. One thing you can never account for is how a young man or woman, because this would apply to the women's sports as well, the women's sports student athletes, I should say. You can never project how that young person is going to adapt to college. I've said this before. I probably said it on this live show before. I've said it, I've said it in a million different places. You can never really know how someone's going to adapt to college, to living on their own, to having that freedom and that independence for the first time in their lives. I mean, you probably knew people who went to college and couldn't handle it. And they weren't living under the pressure of an athletic scholarship and all the demands of playing college football and all the extra things. I mean, they just needed to get through their regular life, not their regular life in school and all this other stuff that comes with playing a Division I sport. You can never really know how someone's going to adjust to that. And sometimes those 5-star prospects who bust, it's not really an indictment on the ranking system or the coaches who offered them. It's just a matter of that guy got to college and he just couldn't handle it. He couldn't motivate himself. He couldn't handle the independence and the freedom and the responsibility. And so he didn't work enough. He didn't put in enough work in the strength room. He didn't put in enough work in the film room. And so he didn't get on the field. They got this 5-star guy. He's just sitting on the bench. Why aren't they playing it? What? Geez, the ranking services got that one wrong. Or, geez, all those offers, those coaches really screwed that up. Or maybe the guy just didn't adjust to college. And then sometimes we put the stars on these kids when they're young. A sophomore gets ranked, right? Sophomore gets a 5-star rating. Well, now we're not only projecting how they're going to be in college, we're projecting what's going to happen to them over just the next 2 years before they even get to college. And sometimes you'll get like that tall, lanky offensive tackle who looks like he can move his feet pretty well, and so you make him 5 stars, and then he never actually develops over the rest of his high school career the way you expect him to. And you either leave him as a 5-star or you adjust the ranking accordingly, and you end up making him like a 3-star, and you say, wow, how'd they screw that up? Ranking him a 5-star, out of 10th grade, geez, what were they thinking? Well, they were trying to project. And if the NFL guys can't even get the projections right all the time, when they're dealing with guys who are 5 years older and have a whole lot more information to go on, I mean, I think you can cut us some slack if we get guys wrong every now and then. Not all the slack. There's some where I think it seems obvious that we're getting it wrong in the moment that it's happening. Not just looking back and saying, boy, you screwed that up. But in the moment, I think you can look at some and say, boy, we're not getting that right. But every time you want to talk about a a Dion Lewis or a Greg Romeus. I mean, these were always the classic examples, right? Aaron Donald, who wasn't a 2-star, he was a 3-star. But I mean, okay, did rivals underrate Dion Lewis, Greg Romeus, and Aaron Donald? Yeah, based on their college production, yes. Did Rutgers offer Dion Lewis? No. Did Miami offer Greg Romeus? No. Did Penn State offer Aaron Donald? No. So maybe the rivals analysts were seeing the same thing that the college coaches were seeing. Now, some coaches, Pitt coaches in this case, because we're talking about Lewis, Romeus, and Donald, but some coaches saw something, but a lot of coaches didn't see it, didn't see the potential, just like the analysts and the people who put the stars on didn't see it. And I'm not saying that the stars are always right. I'm not saying the analysts are always perfect. But what I'm saying is this is an inexact science. Probably about as inexact as it's going to get in terms of sciences. We get some right and we get some wrong. I don't know that Pat Narduzzi's proving the ranking system wrong. I think, here's what I'll say about Pat Narduzzi and his staff. They very much believe in their evaluations, as they should. Another quick digression that I always love to give. I always crack up when coaches say something like, we don't recruit based on stars. Well, I should hope not. If I was making millions of dollars a year as a college football coach, I would absolutely not stake my career, my livelihood on someone else's evaluations. I would recruit based on my evaluations because I don't care what anyone else thinks of this player. I need to believe that this player is going to help me win football games. So we don't recruit on stars. I mean, if you did, you'd probably be out of a job pretty soon because that's a pretty poor way, because it's sort of indicative of how maybe you run all of your operations if you actually did recruit just based on the star rankings. But I digress. This staff really trusts its evaluations, particularly on defensive players. And I think they've done well enough and had enough hits over the years that we can pretty much, again, not entirely go blind faith with it, but give them the benefit of the doubt for the most part when it comes to defensive players, because it seems like they're pretty good at evaluating what they need and the traits and skills that they look for. And that's, starts at the top with Narduzzi, down through Randy Bates, through Charlie Partridge, Ryan Manilak, Corey Sanders, Archie Collins, down to the recruiting department of Graham Wilbert and Carlos Zavko and Adam Kalturi, and it's not necessarily just a pyramid that works like that. Sometimes that information flows up too, and those guys in the recruiting department find guys and kick them up to the position coaches and on through the coordinator and the head coach and all that. I think they do a really good job at evaluating, looking for the traits that they find in players who are able to pan out and have success. And they've done a really good job finding those guys, getting those guys, and then developing those guys. And I think the success these players have had in the NFL speaks to that. I think the success that the team has had, winning 20 games over the last 2 years, speaks to that. They're succeeding in a lot of ways. And whether it's proving recruiting sites right or wrong or whatever, I don't know. And I don't care. We have a job to do as far as ranking and trying to project guys to the next level. And Narduzzi and his staff have a job to do as far as ranking and trying to project guys at the next level. We're all trying to accomplish the same thing to some extent, but just sort of in different ways. So that's long roundabout thoughts on that topic, the recruiting stars and whatnot. All right, let's see. Adam Vinchik says, do you think June will have more commitments than March? Yeah, probably. We got 6? Pitt got 6 in March. I think they'll get more than 6 commitments in June. Yeah. I think this is probably shaping up to be a bigger class. I think they're going to have a lot of guys moving on after this season. Like they're going to have a lot of open scholarship spots. And so I think they're going to swing for the fences on numbers, you know what I mean? And really take a lot of guys. And to some extent, I think you do over-recruit a little bit because you know you're going to lose some, So you take a bunch of commitments knowing that you're probably not going to hold on to all of them. If you want to sign 22, maybe you take commitments ultimately from 23 or 24 or 25, knowing that somewhere along the line, a few of those are going to drop off. So, yeah, I think they'll get more commitments in June than they did in March. I do. Let's see. Coaster King says, what's the status with Quentin Martin? Sounds like Pitt has the momentum right now. So Quentin Martin, 4-star prospect from Bell Vernon, I think he's the number 1 prospect in Pennsylvania. I have to look and see what the rankings are there. But I mean, he's right there at the top of the list. He's one of the top athletes in the country. And he was at Pitt's first spring practice this year. He was at Pitt's first game last fall at the West Virginia game, and he was at Pitt's first spring practice 2 weeks ago on Tuesday. So it's, I think Pitt has been counted out several times for Martin because he's such a high profile guy. And I mean, let's be honest, Pitt hasn't had the best success with high profile Western PA recruits over the years in terms of landing them. Not necessarily what they do once they get here, but in terms of landing them, Pitt hasn't had the most success. And so I think Martin got kind of counted out, or Pitt's chances with Martin got kind of counted out. But it's become pretty apparent that they're in strong position with him. I don't know about favorites. I don't know who's number 1 or who's number 4 or what, anything like that. But I think they're in really strong position with Quentin Martin. Just different things that we've heard, and we've talked about this on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. I think Pitt is very competitive for Quentin Martin right now and pushing pretty hard. And seeming to do a good job trying to land him. Now, this is going to be a battle. It's going to be a real battle that Pitt keeps fighting. From here until December, unless he commits sooner. But even then, it's going to be a battle all the way to the end. I don't know if they'll get him or not. But they are definitely very much in the conversation, and they've got a real shot, which is pretty impressive. He's an impressive athlete. I mean, the comparison that I've heard several times, and I've heard it enough that I've started making it myself, is sort of Doran Dickerson. I don't know if he has quite as many plus attributes, athletic attributes, as Doran did. That's not to say he's not athletic. I mean, he is. He's really athletic. He's really fast. Doran was such a freak. I mean, Doran was one of one. You know what I mean? Doran was a break the mold type of guy. And I don't know if I've seen another athlete like Doran, but in terms of being a plus athlete and having all that speed and being able to play a bunch of different positions, almost to the point where you're not really sure where he's going to play in college, I think there are similarities between Doran Dickerson and Quentin Martin. I mean, I think Quentin Martin could probably could play running back in college. I think he could play linebacker in college. I think he could possibly be a big wide receiver in college. And maybe his best position, again, ultimately where Doran ended up, might be like a tight end H-back type of spot in college. That might be his best role, getting the ball in his hands and giving him a chance to make plays. So I think he's the kind of guy where you take him and bring him in and figure it out later. You'll tell him whatever position he wants to play. You tell him that, hey, we're recruiting you as an athlete. If you want to play linebacker, you play linebacker. You want to play DN, we'll play you a DN. We're not going to play you a quarterback, but pretty much everything else is on the table. You want to be the kicker, we will play you kicker. And then you figure it out once he gets to school. And you find a position for him, and you find a spot where he can really excel. You would like it not to be like Doran, where he bounces around from receiver to running back to linebacker and eventually to tight end, which is where he should have been all along. H-back tight end, just a guy you can put the ball in and create mismatches and matchup advantages with. I think that's what you want to try and do with Quentin Martin. Unless he says he wants to play offense, then you plan for him to be a linebacker, and then you move him to offense when he gets to college. Or if he says he wants to play defense, you move him to linebacker, and then you get him back on offense when he gets to college, because I think that is his best spot. I think trying to score, putting the ball in his hands is his best role. Let's see. Tyler S. says, call your shot. Who's the next 4-star or higher player that commits to Pitt? Maybe even one aside from Quentin Martin. That's tough. It's tough to project that because, it'd be a little bit easier if it was June and they were having the official visits right now, and we had sort of that list of guys coming in. But on the whole, it's a little bit tougher to project that because you don't know who's going to visit, you don't know when they're going to visit, and you don't know when it's going to really kind of resonate like that. They've got the 2 4-star commitments already in Jasir Whittington and Day Farmer, but projecting beyond that is tough. It's tough. I think there's some guys they're in with. I think there's some guys they're doing well with, but predicting a commitment is a little bit trickier. Let's see. Coaster King says, why do you think Pitt is finding newfound success in the state of Pennsylvania for this year? And do you think they have a good chance at landing their other PA targets? So, success in Pennsylvania, they have 5 commitments from the state of PA so far, which is pretty impressive. Out of 10, that's more than they typically end up with. They don't usually have quite as much success in the state of Pennsylvania. Kind of looking down the list here, who else do they have a good shot with? I think Cameron Lindsay from Aliquippa is probably a guy to keep an eye on. Someone that I think they're in good shape with. Cale Brewer, the offensive tackle, has come in a few times for visits. Trey McLeod, the running back from Eastern PA, has visited in the past. I didn't get that. Could you? Oh, sorry. Ryan Corey, the offensive lineman from Pine and Richland, seems like a possibility. It's a pretty good class in the state of Pennsylvania for this year. Rivals doesn't always, Rivals kind of adjusts how far out it ranks, like the PA top 20 or the PA top 30. This year they go all the way to 40, and that's pretty. That's pretty interesting. I can't remember the last time they went quite so deep. Just sort of looking like the class of 2023, it was a top 25 in the state of Pennsylvania. Class of 2022, bring that up. That one went to 30. We could probably go back a little ways, I'm guessing, before we found another year they had the top 40. 2021 was the top 30. 2020 was top 25. It's been a while since you've had this many rated recruits in the state of Pennsylvania. Top 30 in 2019. I'm going back quite some ways. Top 35 in the class of 2018, which was actually the class with Phil Dracovic in it. That class of 2018, Pitt really didn't. Kyle Pitts was in that class. Pitt didn't get anybody in this group. 2018, Devin Danielson and Jake Cradle and Blake Zabovic. That's who they got. Those 3 were in the top 20 of the state. But anyway, you get the point. So this looks like a pretty good year for the state of Pennsylvania. Why are they having success? I don't know if there's one kind of blanket answer. Each guy sort of commits for their own reason. I think, again, kind of what I talked about before, why they're having success at all is, it's the success that they're having. It's the success they're having on the field, the momentum they created with the success over the last 2 years, and then bringing guys in and having guys see Pitt. And so kids from PA have been able to visit. They visited in the fall for games. They came in for a junior day in January, and now they're coming in for a spring visit. And they're saying, wait, I want to be here. I want to be part of this. I want to be part of a team that wins 20 games in 2 years. I want to be part of a team that has Aaron Donald and Kalijah Cansey and Kenny Pickett as their alums. I want to be part of a team that has these facilities and this coaching staff and these players. I think it's all working right now for Pitt. You know what I mean? It's all kind of humming along and creating that momentum, and it's resonating with guys from Pennsylvania. I think you get, to some extent with these early commitments, you have to have guys who are close enough to visit, right? So they can come in and check things out, see it for themselves, and, actually look at it. And I think you can often, you can generate commitments out of that. So I think that's helped. And then just sort of generally speaking with kids in the state of Pennsylvania, I think they're aware of what Pitt is doing. I think the success Pitt has had is catching the attention of kids in Pennsylvania and beyond. And I think that's got a lot to do with all their recruiting success in the Commonwealth and outside of it. Josh Newark says, I hope Pitt is compensating Director of Athletics Heather Lyke well because her status is never going to be higher. Best Pitt AD in my lifetime. I've got to imagine a ton of other schools would love to have her. Yeah, it's hard to deny. It's hard to deny the success, now, especially now that basketball won. You know what I mean? Like, basketball was the one that needed to kick into high gear for Heather Lyke, and it did. It finally did. It finally took off this year. And that was really the thing that was missing. You know, of her head coaching hires, Keith Gavin's done well with the wrestling program, but none of her other hires have really struck gold just yet. You know what I mean? Like, nothing has really caught on, including Jeff Capel prior to this season. But then he goes out and has the year that he has, and it looks a lot better. You know what I mean? On top of the success that football has had and volleyball and the 2 soccer programs, it's, the piece that was missing, particularly for Heather Lyke, was Jeff Capel. Capel needed to start winning, and he finally did. And he won in a big way. And he had Pitt at the top of the ACC. And so, when that happened, it kind of put the whole thing over the top and really made it feel like the whole athletic department is humming along. They're breaking ground on Victory Heights. They got the money for that somehow. They've got all these programs that are succeeding and excelling. And to the victor goes the spoils. And right now Heather Lyke is the victor. Her programs are all doing really well, and she's getting much deserved props for it. I'm sure she is being compensated handsomely. I'm sure there are other athletic departments that would like to have her in charge. But I think, for the time being, that she's pretty content. There are probably jobs that would be appealing to her. But for the time being, she seems pretty happy where she is. Seems. Tyler S. says, Izzy Abanikanda is being perceived as a 2-down back for his poor pass protection in 2021 and his lack of receptions. That's why the general population doesn't believe he's top 3, but he is. Yeah, so this is where it gets tricky for me. I mean, I keep reading that he's not a great pass catcher, and it's true he didn't have, I think, what did he catch last year? 12 passes in 2022, I think. And his pass protection, I feel like he played a lot on third down. I don't know if he was just a 2-down back this past season at Pitt. I feel like he did play a lot on third down. I don't know how his pass protection was. He probably could be better. But I sort of think that, whether it's pass protection or pass catching, I think those things can be coached. I think, guys can obviously have it, and guys can be, they can have those natural traits and develop them well in college and come out of college with, a high skill level at catching passes and blocking. But there is coaching that can be done in the NFL. You can't coach the speed or the vertical leap or the touchdown production, all the things that Izzy Abanikanda is coming in with. A lot of those you can't coach. I think something like pass protection or pass catching, you can coach. And so that shouldn't be as big of a deterrent as maybe it's being made out to be. Let's see. Ben C. says, I know we're talking football, but Jeff Capel looks like he's going for it in the portal already. Anyone in the portal you've got your eye on? I mean, these developments with Joe Girard from Syracuse are really, really interesting to me. They are. I think it was Adam Zagoria reported that Jeff Capel was going to meet with Girard today. That's interesting. He's pretty good three-point shooter. Is he 38% or something like that? Maybe not a big create off the bounce guy, but I think if you brought in a guy like Joe Girard, right, a guard from Syracuse who would be kind of a shooter. I mean, primarily a shooter for you, and if you had sort of a guard rotation that was Girard, Carlton Carrington, Jalen Lowe, Dior Johnson, and a veteran point guard, a transfer point guard. If you had those 5 guys as your guard rotation, I think you'd be in pretty good shape. I really do. Your primary point guards would be the transfer, a transfer who comes in plus Carlton Carrington. Your primary two guards would be, I mean, you wouldn't even need like primary two guards. You'd sort of mix and match at the 2 and the 3 with Gerard and Lowe and Dior. And sometimes you would play just two guards and have, Blake Hinson and Will Jeffers on the court together, or what, we're not going to get into the conversation about Blake Hinson at the 3 and that kind of thing. But sometimes you would play two guards and it would just be the veteran point and Gerard, or the veteran point and Dior, or Carrington and Gerard, or Carrington and Dior, whatever. And sometimes you'd play three guards, some combination thereof, as long as you had the veteran point guard transfer and Carlton Carrington on the court, or Carlton Carrington on the court. As long as you had one of those guys on the court, you could pretty much mix and match at the other one or two wing spots with Gerard, Dior, and Jalen Lowe. They're going to count on the freshmen. I think Carrington and Lowe are going to play. I think Dior's going to have a big role. And I think they're going to want to bring in two transfer guards, one who is a shooter and one who's a point guard. I think that's got to be the objective for the transfer portal this offseason. And I think kind of looking at what they've been doing and how they've been doing it and who they're going after and who they're in contact with and who they've been linked to, it seems like that's what Jeff Capel's objectives are. And he certainly should be able to sell it. It should be an appealing destination, given the success that Pitt's transfer guards had last year. So if you get a mix of Carrington, Lowe, and Johnson, you get a mix of those three freshman guards. And I think we can call Dior Johnson a freshman. You get a mix of those three freshman guards plus two veteran transfer guards, a shooter and a point. I think you have your backcourt pretty much in good shape. With mixing in maybe Hinson at the 3, maybe Nate Santos at the 3, mixing in some guys, I think you'd be in pretty good shape going forward, at least for next season. And then, if you the two transfer guards you bring in are seniors, then they help kind of usher Carrington and Lowe and Dior, get those guys sort of comfortable on the court and help them learn how to play. And then the year after that, those veterans move on and you've got Carrington and Lowe and Dior as your best backcourt in the ACC or something. You know what I mean? Like they play themselves up to that level. I don't think they're going to be called the best backcourt in the ACC by that point. But I'm just saying they play themselves up to that level and have that kind of success next season. They could be pretty highly touted, I think, entering their sophomore years, which would be pretty exciting to watch. See if there's any other comments or questions before we get out of here. I think that might be just about it, but it's a fun conversation as always. Look, there's a lot going on right now. There's a lot we're always going to be talking about here on the Panther-Lair Show and on the Morning Pit on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com and on the website Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. There's always a lot of conversation to have on the message boards, whether it's football, it's basketball, it's recruiting. If we can do an hour live talk show every night and a 20-minute morning talk show every day, Monday through Friday, or an hour live talk show every Wednesday night, and then a 20-minute morning talk show Monday through Friday, there's obviously plenty of Pitt topics to go around. So make sure you go check out Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com to stay up to date on all the Pitt sports news and join the conversations on the message boards. Panther-Lair.com. Listen, while you're here, make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I appreciate that. I also appreciate everybody who jumped into the chat screen tonight. It's been fun to have these conversations. It's been fun to chat about it. As always, one last question. General So's Chicken says, every year in the spring, the recruiting class is right to the top 25. Will it stay ranked in August? Well, your premise is wrong. They don't usually have a top 25 recruiting class in the spring because they don't usually get this many commitments in the spring. I already said that this recruiting class being ranked number 8 in the country on Rivals is largely due to the quantity of recruits having 10 commitments already, one of only 3 teams in the country with double-digit commitments. As other teams catch up in terms of quantity, Pitt's class will drop a little bit in the rankings, but I do think they're on their way to building a good class. So that's my thought on that. We'll keep talking recruiting. We'll keep talking football. We'll keep talking basketball right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com and, of course, at Panther-Lair.com. Panther-Lair.com. So thanks everybody who tuned in tonight. Thanks everybody in the chat for joining it. It's been fun as always. Hope you have a great week so far. And we'll talk to you again tomorrow morning with the Morning Pit. So stay tuned right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.